You're listening to Short Inspirations from Ralph. Attracting the Presence of God, Part 1. You know, over the years I have read or heard about many great revivals from history, but also many towns and areas in our world that have been turned upside down by revival. They've been transformed by the presence of God. Amazing things like prisons closing down, addictions being dealt with, even crops growing larger, economic growth increasing many times, people calling on the name of the Lord, the idols and gods of their fathers torn down and dealt with. One of the things that was at the top of the list in all of these revivals and places was that the people, the churches, the church leaders pursued and ran after the presence of God with all their hearts. They prayed, they organised prayer meetings with all kinds of prayer in all kinds of places. And they decided that their petty differences no longer mattered. And as I'm doing this podcast series, I'm aware that there's been great revivals in American universities where people have just flocked to these meetings, thousands of them, and their lives are being transformed and changed. And it's like they agree with the psalmist in Psalm 84, 1 and 2, where it says, "How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty! My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God." And you know what? There is nothing quite like the presence of God in your life, in your home, in your church. The pursuit of the Lord's presence, both personally and corporately. Nothing else takes priority. Nothing else will suffice or can take the place of His transforming presence. Philip Yancey writes about finding God in unexpected places, and we must realize that God's presence is everywhere. In our homes, our schools, our workplaces and governments, involved intricately with our lives. He's not confined to compartments or restricted areas, even in places where we think He is most likely not to be. Tom White said this in talking to church leaders. We can form all the leadership teams we like. We can set lofty goals, produce inspired outlines, hold meetings and host reputable leaders, but we cannot produce transformation. We must therefore faithfully do those things that attract the presence and favour of our Lord and go on praying and obeying Him. I want to read from the Gospel of Matthew because something like transformation occurred in a startling and dramatic way in Galilee when Jesus, the Son of God, came to town. And wherever Jesus is, there is transformation and life. Nothing is the same again. When you invite Jesus into your heart, your life will not be the same again. And in Matthew chapter 4, verse 23 to 25, it says this, "And Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease among the people. Then His fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought to Him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics and paralytics, and He healed them." Verse 25, "Great multitudes followed Him from Galilee and from Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan." And at the start of the next chapter, Matthew chapter 5, it talks about Jesus calling His disciples together. And I like to think this was like a staff meeting, perhaps even a disciples debrief. And He could have said something like this, "Listen, guys, I've got good news and I've got bad news. What do you want to hear?" And they say, well, give us the good news first. So He says, "Did you see that? Did you see the power of God come down and do all these miraculous things. People healed and restored, delivered. This is the good news, that God's power and presence is here and available to everyone. That's great, they say. Then what's the bad news? Let's look at that in our next episode. God bless you today.